Bueno, bienvenidos a este nuevo episodio del podcast Product Sessions, auspiciado por Product Hub. Este es el segundo episodio del podcast. El día de hoy tenemos un invitado muy especial. Se trata de Chris Jones, quien es partner de SVPG, que la sigla corresponde a Silicon Valley Product Group, que es una especie de consultora fundada por Marty Cagan en el año 2001, con el objetivo de ayudar a otras empresas a crear productos digitales exitosos. Chris es coautor, junto a Marty Cagan, de dos libros. Uno es Empowered y el otro es Transform. Dos libros de lectura obligada para cualquier Product Manager o aspirante a Product Manager. Así que vamos a abordar muchos temas relacionados con estos libros, con estos conceptos. Pero antes de presentar a Chris, vamos a presentar a David, que es co-host de este ciclo. Hola David, ¿cómo estás?
Hola Peter, ¿cómo va? Contento de estar de vuelta acá en el podcast. Muy emocionado por la participación que tenemos hoy.
Sí, la verdad que sí, nerviosos, un poco ansiosos por este nuevo episodio. Y más después de la buena recepción que tuvimos con el primero, así que creo que quedó la vara muy arriba también para continuar en esa senda. Bueno, ya estamos en vivo, ya tenemos gente que nos está viendo. Si te parece, vamos a switchar a inglés el episodio y presentamos a Chris.
Dale, espectacular, me parece bien, así que vamos a meternos en el tema de hoy. So, Chris, hi, nice to meet you. Thank you for joining us today. And for the audience, welcome back, listeners. You're tuned into another episode of our product sessions. And today we have a really, really special guest joining us. He's Chris Jones. So, Chris, to kick things off, could you give us, the listeners, a brief introduction about yourself and your work at Silicon Valley Product Group?
Yeah, great. Great to meet you guys, and thanks for the invitation. It's really, really nice to meet you and to your audience here. I've been in product management for some time, probably about 30 years at this point, variety of different jobs. Went into kind of a leadership positions within product about 20 years ago, a mix of leading product management, UX, and data teams. Variety of companies, some of them very much B2B, selling kind of big software solutions with a direct sales force. Also had a number of experiences with B2C companies, direct to consumer sorts of things. About 10 years ago, I joined Silicon Valley Product Group. Silicon Valley Product Group is a consultancy that was formed by Marty Cagan a little over 20 years ago. And its reason for existing is basically to share the techniques of the world's top tech-powered companies. The companies out there that are able to just continuously innovate and bring value to their customers. So we've been working, for a long time now to help companies that are trying to get aligned with those sorts of models. So I work with a lot of different companies of varying sizes, of varying business models in all sorts of industries. I help them assess how they're working now and consult on how they can get more aligned with what kind of what the best companies are doing. And a lot of it also involves just training and education, kind of running workshops and courses for people, at all different levels within the companies, from their most senior executives to the individual contributors who are, actually coding up the products.
Great. Chris, I have a icebreaker question. It's a simple question. In your own words, what is a product manager for you?
Yeah, and it's funny. What seems like it should be such an easy question has so many definitions out there. The way I talk about it and the way Silicon Valley Product Group talks about it is that the product manager is a member of a product team, a cross-functional product team, And that product manager is primarily responsible for ensuring the value and the viability of what the team is creating. So by value, I mean that this is something that users or customers will buy or use when given a choice. They're actually getting something from it that they need. And viability means that it works for the business. So that, it's not enough just to satisfy the customer. You have to do it in a way that's going to work for the business. So still pretty abstract, but that's generally what we see. Many other definitions of product management out there. And of course, there's a lot of work and tasks along the way, but at the essence, that's what it is. It's about value and viability.
Okay, great. And or maybe in our product community, there is always a debate about whether the product manager role is a business role or is more related to a technology role. What do you think is an ideal background for a product manager? Would you rather hire someone with a degree in computer science or maybe in business administration? And following this concept that the product manager is focused on value risk and viability risk.
Yeah. So do I have to choose? Is kind of how I would respond to that.
Yes, you have to choose. Just one.
Well, so in my career, I actually have always made a point of choosing both. I will always have more than one person who's on the team, and those different backgrounds are both quite useful. So I've had some product managers who were very, very successful, who came much more from a business school background. And I've had some product managers who were very successful who came from an engineering background. The truth is, though, they have to be sort of flexible enough to stretch into the other side of things. So, I would never want a product manager, for example, with a business background who didn't feel comfortable sitting down with an engineering architect and having a real discussion, maybe not about the architecture itself, but they're not going to be intimidated by the types of things that are going on in the room. Similarly, if I've got somebody who's got an engineering background, I want them to be able to talk to, say, the VP of finance about some of the key metrics that are driving the financial metrics and things like that. So really, it's such a unique role in that it really does live right at the intersection of those two things. And I'm being honest with you to say that I don't have a single preference. And whenever I'm hiring, I would be looking for a portfolio of skills and a portfolio of backgrounds.
Great, really interesting, Chris. It's a bit crazy here in Latin America. The concept of product managers is a bit new, and you just said that the SVPG, it's like 20 years now around, so it's a lot of time. And here we had like the path where we had a lot of product owners, then Scrum Masters, then agility specialists, and now we are starting to see a spike in product managers' roles in the market. So can you address that a little bit? What do you think could be the main differences between product managers and the concept you try to describe in your books and these other roles, Scrum Masters and product owners?
Yeah, so there's a lot to that question. Those particular roles that you're describing, the Scrum Master and the product owner, those are roles within a particular Agile process. So there are kind of rituals that those people need to be concerned with and making sure that it all goes forward. For us, it really has to do with the difference between product discovery and product delivery. So a lot of Scrum is really around product delivery. How do we chop things up in ways that are a lot more efficient? How do we ensure that we're working on the most important things in the backlog? All of that sort of thing. What those Agile modes don't really talk about very much is how you get a good backlog. How do we know that we're working on things in a product context that are really going to make a difference for our customer? So when we start talking about a product manager, yeah, they're going to be doing the things that a product owner would typically do, but they're doing a lot more things in order to ensure that what gets built is, back to those same two things, that it's valuable and that it's viable. So that's really it. It's moving largely from a delivery focused model making sure that the engineers are efficient and working on things and busy in all the right ways, moving from that to more of a discovery-based model, ensuring that we're really building the right thing, building something that's going to make a difference in the market and it's going to make a difference for our customers.
Great. Really, a really simple way to explain it. And it's sad, or sometimes it's like strange to see so many open positions for these other roles. They're more like project managers, not project managers.
Yeah. And by the way, to be fair, we see that a lot in the United States as well. There is a mix here, and there are many companies that are familiar with product management the way that I'm talking about it, but we also have a lot of that very project management, kind of old school product owner companies as well. That's why SVPG has a business. It's companies that are trying to move from that to this new model, or this not so new model, but this more effective model.
You should come to Latin America. You're going to have a lot
I'd
of
love
work
to.
here.
Would love
Great.
to.
Moving on a little bit, we want to deep dive in our main topic today, that is the product operating model, Chris. Can you explain to our listeners what is exactly this product operating model?
Yeah, so I'm going to try and do it quickly here. The product operating model this is not new. This is really, what we've been advising companies on for a very long time. The term is kind of new. The fact that the industry is beginning to use a term to describe all of this. And at the highest level, you can think of an operating model is just, how does work get done within a company? How do we carve things up? Who are the roles? How are they put together functionally and cross-functionally? What sorts of techniques are being used? What is just overall the general approach to how work is organized? The product operating model is one that is quite different than what is in most other companies. We usually contrast the product operating model with a project operating model. A project operating model is what you usually see in typical waterfall, where something is there's a business case and it gets green lighted, and you might put a team together to go and execute it, and then they execute it and they put it out into the market. And along the way, you might gather requirements, you might have designers, you still might have Agile there, but it's very much based on output. What we're doing in the project model is asking people to ship particular solutions and ship them by certain dates, and everybody is driven by that output. Did we make the date? Did we get through all of the important requirements? And what we found is that model, that project model, really tends to fail quite often. And there are some, if you kind of tear it apart, there are some structural reasons why that's going to lead you to bad outcomes as far as products are concerned. The product operating model really sets a different pulse to how this stuff is done. And it focuses much more on the outcomes that you're trying to achieve with something. It's not just ship this feature, it's we need to achieve this business outcome. And you may ship a feature along the way in order to do that, but what we're holding you accountable for is how well did you solve the problem. So an example here might be, you could ask somebody to ship a new walkthrough, for say a new customer, or you could ask a team to make the walkthrough process take half as long with fewer errors. And there may be any number of ways that a team might go after that, but they are being measured on the success of what they're shipping. They're not being measured just on the fact that they shipped it and they shipped it in time. So that's the highest level. It's really about setting up a whole set of systems and roles and ways of thinking and accountability that gets your entire product organization with your developers and your designers and all of that, getting that all much, much more oriented around the outcomes that you're trying to achieve, as opposed to just shipping.
Great. Really, it's a slight change in perspective on how to address a problem, but it's really powerful because it really empowers the teams. So really good. I want to ask you, a lot of our audience have read the first two books, Inspired and Empowered, and maybe not the third one. So to try to connect the dots to our audience. In the first books, you talk about feature teams and empowered teams. How those concepts scale to this product operating model?
Yeah, well, this is the move from feature teams to empowered teams is a fundamental component of the product operating model. We have a couple of other fundamental components, but that one goes into the broad bucket of how do teams solve problems. And fundamentally, it's the difference between, are you asking them to build a feature? Are you asking them to satisfy a roadmap? Or are you asking them to solve particular problems in the way that they best see fit? That's the fundamental difference between a feature team and an empowered team. And of course, in practice, there's going to be a lot of nuance here. There might be some mixing of these concepts, but an empowered team is really spending most of its time figuring out the best way to solve a problem. And if you think for a second, just imagine a small product team. And imagine the difference, if you're on that team, between receiving work in the form of, I need you to build this solution. Compare that to how you'd feel if you got the instructions, I need you to solve this problem. Whatever solution you think is going to be the right one to do it, obviously within certain constraints, that's going to motivate a very, very different approach to what you're going to do. Even, the engineers on the team, they're not going to just start building stuff, right? They realize that, okay, we're not done until we're solving the problem. I'm going to be skeptical of what that solution is. I actually want to go out and get some evidence and make sure that what we do is going to work. Ideally, before we actually start working on it, how can we reduce some of the risk in our approach? Maybe we're going to learn in the process of doing that our approach actually isn't going to work. It's not going to solve the problem the way that we thought it would. So we got to try a different approach. It's still on us in order to get there. So just the simple act of doling out the work in that form can result in a really different set of motivations inside these teams. A lot of it is about the behavior that we want to incentivize. I'll take it a little further and say that, as product managers, we always hear we need to talk to customers more, right? I mean, I've never heard a product manager say, I talk to customers too much, right? That just doesn't ever happen. But what is going to motivate you to do it? Is it shame because you think you should be doing it more? Or is it because you've realized that actually to truly be successful in what you've been asked to do is going to compel me to do it, right? I have to actually talk to customers. Otherwise, I'm going to get this wrong and I'm going to get measured, the wrong way. If I'm just being asked to ship things, I might check in with my customers. I might do a little bit of usability testing here or there, but, it's not going to matter that much. In fact, I'm probably going to be disincented to talk with them. They're just going to slow me down from this output. So yeah, that notion from that first book of moving to an empowered team is one of three, really kind of fundamental pillars. We call them dimensions in the product operating model.
Okay, great. Peter?
I have a follow-up question about this. In an empowered team, thinking at scale, how this team solve the frictions with other teams with dependencies or
yeah,
where the team needs to another team that put muscle, or capacity to develop an initiative.
Yeah.
How this product operating model companies solve this type of problems?
Right. So that's a very straightforward question with a very long answer, but I'll hit a couple of points on it. The first thing is to realize that let's say you've got a collection of however many teams you have. It's not the case that all these teams are skittering around just working on what they want to work on. Leaders are creating a context. They're creating things like a product vision and a product strategy, and they're dividing the teams in a certain way that makes sense. So that, and this is a shared context that all of these teams have, so that as they're making decisions, within this empowered space, they're moving in the same direction. But there's more than this. There's more than that shared context. It is absolutely possible for multiple teams to work together to solve the same problem. And there, we're relying on collaboration across the teams. We use things called shared objectives, or in some cases, common objectives. There's an objective that 2 or 5 or 20 teams might be working together on. And that is absolutely okay. In fact, I'd say that at scale, that's probably a more common model than a team having an objective all themselves. But there are many things that can make these dependencies better or worse in terms of how the teams are organized. Where are the boundaries of ownership, for example? You can divide teams in a way that make dependencies better or worse. So that's another factor in there. And yeah, like I said, there's just a lot to answering that question. It's a very good question, but it is absolutely solvable. You just have to do some of the things that I just described.
It's all about team topology and leadership.
Yeah, right, exactly. So team topology is the term we use to describe how do you set the areas of ownership on the various teams that are there. And what are those boundaries? Where does one team stop and the next one start in terms of what they actually own? But then all of those other things I described as well, things like product vision play into this, things like product strategy play into this, and then how those objectives are organized and put onto those teams. And you're still, even with all of those things that I just said, you're still going to have teams working in groups in some cases against objectives.
Okay, great. Very clear answer. Dave?
Yeah, really interesting. I was wondering, Chris, sometimes I think senior stakeholders are scared of giving a lot of autonomy to teams because they need to have control of what they're trying to focus on or what's going to be the next quarter in terms of features and other impacts they're trying to drive. When do you think a company, a product manager, or a founder should try to implement this operating model in their companies?
Yeah, well, as you said, oftentimes it is hard for kind of the business stakeholders to. It feels like giving up control, right? The business stakeholders are used to being the ones who are determining what gets built, and it's the product and engineering people that just go and build it. And what we're asking them to do is to say, hey, trust us. We on this product side, we actually have a pretty good idea of what the right thing is going to be. Just let's start communicating in the problems that need to be solved. So, the first thing there is to figure out how you build up trust between these two groups. And in many cases, most of that responsibility actually does fall not on the stakeholder. It actually falls on the product managers and the engineers and the designers, mostly the product managers here, because they're the ones concerned with value and viability primarily. And many times people who are newer to this job or who've had a more of a product owner view of things, they're not very good at this, right? They don't actually know the customers that well. They don't actually understand the business very well. They might not know the data very well. Certainly, they don't know it as well as the business stakeholder who's asking them to do the work. And just imagine if you're that business stakeholder and you're working with a product manager who doesn't know the customers as well as you do. Like, why are you going to trust them? In fact, that would be really kind of foolish to do that because there's no way they can possibly do a good job. So it's very important that the product people take it seriously, that they need to get really good at this stuff. They need to be worthy and trusted to make the right sorts of decisions in terms of the functionality that they're going to build. So your question is kind of when does it make sense to do this? I would argue really from the start, it makes sense to do this because this is how innovation happens, is when you're able to delegate, empowerment this way. This is really how you get innovation. But it can't happen if the teams, the product teams actually don't have the right knowledge to be trusted. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense.
It really does, and it has a lot of complexities in between, but I think it's a really great answer. Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Just a quick parenthesis there. you're speaking a lot of interviewing customers, and sometimes it's really difficult between all the things we have to prioritize, stakeholder management, and trying to set the strategy of the team. How do you make time, and do you have any tips on how to do this more? I always have a guilt because I think to myself I should be speaking to more customers.
Right.
And it's really difficult.
Yeah. Well, so let me give you two answers on that. The way that I'm always counseling, product managers on this is for companies that are committed to working this way. Is if you're a product manager and you're buried in so many other things, and you need to be doing this, this is a place where your manager should be able to help you. Your manager should be somebody who understands this and may help you find where that time can come from. Maybe they'll move some things around for you. Maybe they'll help facilitate it, making it easier to actually get in front of the customers. But if you've got a manager who's bought into operating this way, that's the first place to go. The other way I want to answer this is that a lot of people hear about a lot of product managers hear about product discovery, and they imagine it as entirely additive on top of what their existing job is. It's like, all right, my job is already too big, and now you're saying product discovery and all these interviews and all that. Like, how can I fit that in? I can't get anything, I can't get the stuff I need to get done. That's the wrong way to think about this, because it isn't additive. The whole point of product discovery is it should subtract a lot of other things. It should, namely, mean that you're actually building fewer things. You're just building the things that you have evidence are going to work. What's going on now is you're spending a lot of time, or typically, product managers who don't have time, spending a lot of time on the delivery side of things. You're shepherding through, these types of solutions, doing all of the complicated, work to make sure everything is on time and the engineers are doing all the right thing. That's really, that's important stuff, but it's not really the product management job. The product management job is primarily one of discovery and ensuring that we're using these resources as well as we possibly can, because we're figuring out what's going to work ahead of time. We're iterating on what's going to work in a way that's much, much cheaper than actually building a product and iterating on that product. So yeah, there's work here that you weren't doing before, but hopefully there's work that you no longer need to do just because we're doing such a better job teeing it up in product discovery.
Great insight there. Do you think there's a layer where you have to stop talking to customers, or is it always a good practice also for product leaders and managers to speak to customers?
I don't think there's any particular rule of thumb. I think most good leaders are pretty in touch with this stuff too. Either they're directly talking with customers or they're deeply tied in with their teams. But I will say it's absolutely required for the team level product managers who are ultimately making the decisions about what's getting built. Those people do need to have direct access to the customers.
Great. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
So we've been speaking a bit of the product operating model, and going back to that, you've been speaking of discovery and delivery, and we've been seeing that in the book you talk about dimensions. Can you go a bit deeper into that?
Yeah, we've been talking about one of those dimensions. This is just one of the ways that we describe the product operating model, is that it has three big dimensions to it. And one thing also to keep in mind, I don't think I said this up front on the product operating model, this isn't a process, and it's not even really a framework. It's a set of principles. It's a set of high-level beliefs on how you want to organize your company. But the dimensions are basically how you build, how you how you solve problems, and then how you decide what problems to solve. We've been talking about that middle one, how you solve problems. And that's fundamentally about that move from feature teams to empowered teams, where rather than doling out work in the form of solutions to be implemented, we're doling out work in the form of problems to be solved. That's really how you solve problems. The first dimension I described, how you build, that's really kind of what's classically understood is what the engineers are doing. And what a lot of companies really need to do there is move away from these big bang releases where they're releasing every month or every quarter, or in some cases every year, or in a few cases even more frequently than that. Changing how you build, to get more aligned with the product operating model means that you're shipping no less than every 2 weeks, and frankly, a lot more frequently than that if you can. This, for many companies, this dimension is a pretty heavy lift. It might involve retooling the architecture. It might involve creating a lot more, QA test automation, retooling your development pipeline so it becomes easier to kind of check things in and have them automatically get built and integrated with the rest of the product and ultimately shipped. So there's that whole aspect of it. There's a whole other aspect of changing how you build that really speaks to instrumentation and monitoring. Because we're trying to move so much to outcomes, we need to make sure that anything that we ship is measurable. How well is it performing? Are people using it? What segments of the audience are using it? Do people use it once and then never use it again? Or do they go deeper once they start to encounter it? We need to know all of this stuff because this is what tells us how well we've actually solved a problem. So in terms of changing how you build, this has to be permeating everything that's going on, is that we're instrumenting everything that we ship and that we're monitoring everything that we actually deploy to see how well it's performing. So part of this also is just having an infrastructure that allows us to push things out, pull things back, maybe push multiple versions of things out at the same time, progressively deploy. If we've got multiple versions out, maybe compare how one is behaving compared to the other one. So all of that stuff is in that first dimension of changing how you build. The second dimension we've already spent a good bit of time on. But again, like I said, that was changing how you solve problems. And that's really where empowered teams come in. The third dimension is changing how you decide what problems to solve. There are any number of problems that can be solved in one of these companies. And, many times there really is no process beyond sort of intake and prioritization to figure out what you're going to work on. There's no central strategy that really drives it all. Usually in companies, you've got lots and lots of stakeholders who are asking you to build lots and lots of stuff. And maybe we've been successful at getting them to communicate in terms of problems. And that's kind of what the level of the partnership looks like. Well, it's still just a big stream of problems. And there is no way we're going to effectively be able to solve all of them. So how do you choose? How do you put some real focus on this? And what's going to be your approach so that you get as much out of your team as you possibly can? So that's that third dimension. And it's really where we talk a lot about product strategy. Things like product vision live there as well. They're the sorts of things that provide some shape on where everything is going. But what we're trying to do is give a real kind of central purpose for what we're working on now and why we're working on this now, what we might be working on later, what we're going to work on perhaps never. Giving us the tools to say no to certain things. So those are the three dimensions. There's how you build, how you solve problems, and then how you decide which problems to solve.
Oh, it's really broad. It has a lot of...
There's a lot there. And we're at a lot of different levels of the company as well. So, just to kind of tie it to parts of the organization, how you build is mostly the domain of engineering. That there's, and a lot of companies, that's as far as they go with the transformation. They'll look at it as an agile transformation. They might do some stuff to the architecture. They might break into teams. They get CI/CD going, all of that stuff. And they say, we're awesome, right? And don't get me wrong, you've made a lot of progress at that point, and you don't want to go backward from that. But that's really only one aspect of the product operating model. When you start getting into changing how you solve problems, that's really extending it to the broader product organization. That involves product management, involves design, might involve data, involves kind of how you construct those teams. And so we get a whole lot more people involved, in that sort of thing. Of course, engineering is involved in that too. when we get into the how you decide what problems to solve, we're really speaking to the entire company at this point. And it really talks about this, what's this interface look like between the business stakeholders and the rest of the product organization, and how the decisions are made on what actually is going to get built. And by the time we get to this level, we're really talking about the whole company.
Okay, great. You will probably need a lot of alignment there.
Yeah.
Any tips on this last dimension on how to decide what problems to solve? Because I think companies have so many problems. How do you focus on?
Yeah. So this is one of those things where there is no, there's no paint by numbers way to do this. There's no whatever special triangle formula that's going to spit out a particular strategy. What's usually involved is that your leaders of product management, your leaders of engineering, your leaders of design, they're deeply engaged with everything that's going on. They understand what's going on in product discovery. They have a deep understanding of the market, of how the product works. And that's usually where this comes from. It's their insights on what's going to make sense to approach. A couple of things about product strategy. Steve Jobs has one of the best quotes on this that I've ever found, and he says, most people think that focus, when you're doing product strategy, most people think that focus is about focusing on the thing you got to focus on, saying yes to the thing that you got to focus on. He said that's not what it's about at all. Focus is about saying no to the potentially hundreds of other really good ideas. And that's really what it comes down to, is being able to be disciplined, to say, this is where we're going. And yes, that's a good idea, but we're not going there now. The other thing I think it's important to keep in mind about strategy and focus in particular is, in some cases, it's less important what you focus on. It's more important just that you focus. Without that, if you're distracted at every newest thing, you're just not going to end up doing anything particularly well. So those are a couple of things that we coach on with that.
Great. Simple but extremely difficult.
Yeah, it's simple to say, very, very difficult to implement, and quite complex just because of the number of people and factors that are coming to play there.
Okay, great. Peter?
Yes, we have a question from our audience. This is from Barbara Cardoso, and she asked, how do you envision the role of AI and machine learning evolving within product management over the next decade? Specifically, do you see these technologies enhancing traditional product lifecycle methodologies, or do you anticipate a more transformative shift in how products are conceived, developed, and launched?
Yeah, this is the big question, right? I think everybody is struggling for the answer to this one. My take on it is, I don't think that the concepts around the product model and how products are done are fundamentally going to change. I do think that many of the AI tools are going to create huge leverage for some of the players in that. So, whether it's kind of helping understand what's going on with data, whether it's helping come up with, in some cases, actually even a strategy, getting a suggestion as to where you might start with what some of the key focus areas are and what the key insights are. I think it's going to be just a very, very powerful set of tools that's going to augment the people who are doing this sort of thing. Not a person who believes that we're all going to be replaced by this, certainly not in the next decade or so. But I do think that there's a lot going on in terms of the processes within the operating model and where it can be enhanced by this. Of course, the other way to look at this is just the nature of the products that are getting built right now. Nearly all the startups here in San Francisco are in some way tied to generative AI. So, we're seeing an explosion there. And what we've also seen is that the fundamental approach to how the product operating model works really doesn't change with those types of products either. There's the how you build dimension, there's the how you solve problems dimension, there's the how you decide what problems to solve. But yeah, if you guys have a take on it, I'm interested. I think we're all interested in where this is going with AI.
It's really tough, but I think our jobs are safe for now. I heard a phrase that was that PMs are going to evolve from product managers to prompt managers.
Mm-hmm.
So they are going to orchestrate a lot of input into the AIs so they can set how we build, what problems to solve, and how we should
Yeah.
address them. So I think it's
Right.
a good take, because I think we can gain a lot of AI and apply it to our day-to-day.
Yeah. I've heard that take as well. That's kind of the next phase is we orchestrate a number of AIs to do things, and then when does the AI become the orchestrator itself? And maybe that's the next stage. Yeah.
I have to admit, I have a list of prompts for some things.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it comes really handy, and to
Yeah.
set up like a script for user interviews or something like that, you have a
Yep.
good kickstart. So really helpful.
Yep. Absolutely.
Great, Chris. So we're coming to an end, and to wrap things a bit, we wanted to ask you if you have any final thoughts or advice for our listeners, especially those who are working in companies that maybe still don't follow this principle of the product operating model, that here in Latin America, maybe it's most of them.
Yeah.
There is something you can do for their teams?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's probably been clear in my answer that this isn't something you can do entirely from the bottom up. Individual contributor product managers can't just go and say, "Hey, we're working the product operating model now." There are just so many other people who really have to get on board. All that said, there are things that you are empowered to do as individual product managers, and it's much more around just making sure that you're as smart as you can possibly be on the customers and on the data and how the business works, and making sure that you're connected to the various stakeholders in the organization. You've got relationships with them. You can run things by them. You can ask them to educate you. The smarter you get on all of these things, the better you're going to be at helping figure out what the real solutions need to be. And at the very least, you're going to have more likelihood of having a seat at the table with the various business stakeholders. So that's the thing that you can control, and I would encourage you all to do that, just to get yourselves as ready as you can to facilitate this type of move.
It's coming. Great.
Yeah.
Well, one last one. Is there any product you're using currently where you see that customer insight it's taken into account and then used to build their products? Something that maybe surprised you?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of what's in my current kind of information diet right now. Give me a second.
While you think, I had to admit I use a bit of TikTok, and sometimes they have a really good customer oriented delivery. So maybe to save videos, before you had to touch different buttons to save a video. Now you have it in the bar next to the video. And a bad example of that, maybe LinkedIn. You have to press 3 different buttons to save a post, and then it's really difficult to access them. So
right. Yeah. I mean, I think those are. I mean, I love it when people really take interest in kind of what's working in their products and what's not working in their products. I was a little late to the party on Notion as a tool. I know it's been around for a while, but I probably started using it maybe a year ago or so, and I've used it. I've almost solidly moved out of Evernote now, but I use it for my assessments. I use it for my proposals. I use it for managing a lot of information. And it's difficult to explain in some. I think the AI tools in it are quite good, but it's difficult to explain why it just has a tightness to it that has worked for me. I find myself happier when I'm working in it, and I'm sure that there was a lot of customer interaction to make that happen. A really good, kind of tight sense of design. So I'm sure the second we hang up, and I'm embarrassed that I wasn't a little bit more prepared with that, because that is the product question, right? But one that's been recently on my mind has been Notion.
I'm also a Notion fan, and it's very minimalistic and a flexible tool. For me, it's that is working. Chris, we have to thank you for this opportunity to meet you and share all your experience and useful tips. And thank you for helping us to grow the product community here in South America. And we are very, very grateful for this opportunity.
You bet, guys. Thank you. I'm flattered to be invited. Thanks for talking, and let's do it again sometime.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris.
Cheers.
Thank you to all the audience.
Bye.